Tales from the Podcast is brought to you by the following generous sponsorships. The Happy Hour News Team. Check them out at www.happyhournewsteam.com. TalesFromThePodcast.com, where you can pick up your copy of Tales of Shock and Terror #1. The Skewered Universe Podcast. And viewers like you.
Hey there, welcome to another episode of Tales from the Podcast. As always, I'm your host, JB, here with Uncle Ron and Jeff. Hopefully you motherfuckers are doing pretty good. How's it going, guys?
Yeah.
Just meh.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
I know we want to jump into stuff pretty good today and have a little bit of fun here, but definitely beforehand, I want to tell everybody and remind them to go over to talesfromthepodcast.com, scroll down, check out the link to buy our comic book, Tales of Shock and Terror. You can touch it, you can rub it, you can caress it, you can go and snuggle up to it close at night. I really don't give a fuck what you do with it, but go buy a copy for you, your brother, your sister, your grandpa, your
extended family that has a very confusing lineage.
Very confusing lineage. Yes. I mean, in fact, I've heard that this is the only thing they want. So go there, check this out while they're still available.
I mean, even buy it for the good old boys who end up having one of them become the mayor of your small town.
Yeah.
That's true. And, I mean, realistically, if you buy it, that still counts as a sale. And toilet paper is getting pretty expensive these days. So if you buy like 4 or 5 copies of this, you could use a couple as toilet paper. It's all sales to me.
Is toilet paper still a thing? I mean, never mind.
Yeah, that's probably best we don't talk about that. Yeah.
God damn it, Jeff.
I'm kidding.
Oh, is doing this still thing? I think
it is
now. Talking about wiping. So now, anyways, let's go ahead and jump into this episode. Ron, I know that you requested that you take the lead for this episode.
Yes, because I'm a big fan of the film that we are about to talk about. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about Texas Chainsaw 3D. And who better to do it with than with Leatherface himself, Mr. Dan Yeager. Dan, thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, I have to ask you straight off the bat, can you explain the lineage here? Because in the first film, as far as I'm concerned, this is the only true sequel to the first movie. And if you go by what is said in this one, the cook is Leatherface's father? I always thought it was his brother.
I mean, there's clearly some inner family type stuff.
I'm not sure any familial, father, brother, that's a thing. Sister, wife.
Their family tree doesn't branch out; it just goes straight up and down.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I don't think any of it's clear.
It's a family bush. It's just entangled.
Yeah. Basically. Now you got this because I can't pronounce his last name, but you met Carl Mazanko. Is that how you say it? Mazzacone. Mm-hmm. And that's how you got the role as Leatherface, right?
That certainly led to it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had known Carl for about a year and a half, I think. And for the first probably year that we knew each other, he didn't know I was an actor. Because actors are a pain in the ass, to everybody else in the movie industry, especially producers.
Oh, I bet.
And we met through a mutual friend who was he used to be on his crew. He was a medic, and Carl would hire him for every movie. And I wasn't introduced as, here's Dan, he's an actor, and I just never mentioned it. And I think he was. I mean, I knew him well enough by then that I knew he'd appreciate that. I've never would have, put me in a movie. That's the first thing anybody, we go out to bars and hang out and meet people, and I'm an actor. Oh, all right. He would tell people he was a plumber, because it's just relentless. Actors are so, thirsty. And so anyway, it was a good year and a half, and we were working on a project at his house. We were building something. I can't remember what the hell it was. But anyway, I started having to duck out early, and finally he got wise. He says, "You're doing a play, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, you're going to invite me to it?" I said, "Well, I was going to wait and see if it was any good." And so anyway, he's well, a real friend would invite, his friend. I said, "Yeah, I'll take care of you. I'll get you tickets." It was this weird. I don't know if you're familiar with the tradition of English pantomime.
Very little.
Yeah, it's kind of a Christmas thing in England. In the off season for the theaters, they put on these farcical pantomimes. And now, I mean, this is, it was always, traditional. They were kind of amateur productions, but now they've become big. The equivalent of Broadway. I guess West End London, big productions. But there was a British social club in North Hollywood, and I was a member for years and used to do their pantomimes. And then I kind of got away from it for a while, and then I still had friends over there, and so anyway, the panto came up, and I said, "Yeah, I'll do it." And so anyway, the closing night is always the most raucous and the most fun, and so I invited Carl to that. I said, "Don't worry, I'll get you tickets." So I got him tickets, and he came, bless his heart, and I played the character Herbert the Horrible Ogre, and through the whole play, they talk about Herbert the Horrible Ogre and how horrible and everything he is and how scared they are of him. And then in the last act, he shows up and he bounds on stage, and it's a decent sized theater. But, I knew how to play the character. And, even in that context of farcical comedy, I scared the shit out of people. And I think Carl was impressed with that. And, he isn't the type of producer to shove any actor friend of his down the throat of a director. He didn't want to say, hey, John, this is my friend Dan. I think we should hire him for Leatherface. He just invited us both to the same Christmas party. And Lessenhop wrote an article for the Huffington Post about meeting Leatherface for the first time, or not actually meeting. I guess meeting, because I think he does mention when we actually formally met. We were both at this party, and in the article he says he's standing in the kitchen talking to Mark Berg, who produced all the Saw movies. And he kept looking past Mark, and Mark Berg reportedly said something to the effect that, man, she better be something, or you're just an asshole. He says, no, I think I'm looking at Leatherface. And I was just standing there, I'm not a party guy really. I was just standing there watching the party, by myself. And it was a big party. I mean, there were.
Well, you're kind of imposing though. You're like what, 6'4", 6'5"?
6'6".
Oh, 6. Oh, well, I was wrong. Okay, so there you go. I mean, that's probably another reason why too.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I definitely have the physicality, to play the character. And Carl was adamant about one thing. He didn't want one of these guys who, lives in the gym to play the role, and, back in those days I had decent muscle mass, but, I never worked out really. Although, no, I kind of did exercise. I had a trainer for a while and, got in shape, but, not a bodybuilder or a weightlifter or anything. And so he got dozens of calls from every agent who represented a pro wrestler and a ex-football player, and everybody wanted to play that role. And I met John at formally at Carl's house. I think the following week.
Oh,
And
nice.
we sat down and talked about Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I think he realized I knew more about the movie than he did. And more about the lore behind it, because I had given them notes on the script, pointing out, of course, all the timeline problems.
Now, did you get Gunnar was on set with you? Did you end up getting any kind of tips from him? Did you go to him for anything? Because your performance is very Gunnar-like when it comes to comparing the two. For my money, the only two people that have played Leatherface are you and Gunnar. Everybody else is just a pale comparison.
Well, I've been very open about the fact that, I ripped Gunnar off as mercilessly as I could. That to me was the program of the movie. If we want, to have any semblance of believability that this is a continuation of that story, he's the only character who makes it,
Yeah.
And so, I mean, my intent was always to come up with a recognizable version of that character, who of course is older and has gone through an entire lifetime of things that changed him. But they changed him in specific ways. He grew from the original movie. In the original movie, he was the dedicated instrument of the will of others.
Mm-hmm.
you know, he had no identity of his own. And Gunnar said to me when we had first met on set, he said, you know, his idea of the character was that, you know, if you remove the mask, you'd find nobody there. And by the time I come along, you know, as Leatherface, you know, 20 some years older, despite the timeline, he is supposed to be 20 some years older. He has developed his own idea, which is entirely, you know, based in vengeance. You know, that's all he is now. You know,
he's kind of like holding in the fact that he let Sally get away and got his entire family killed.
Right. Yeah. The lawyer mentions that.
Yeah.
There's a whole bit of anger towards that entire town and what they did to his family, I feel.
Oh yeah.
And it's very justified in a way, because you feel like, and not to jump in, but you feel like Leatherface is more sympathetic. You're like, well, his entire family's gone, so it's kind of justified that he's pissed off at all these rednecks who just burned his entire family.
Yeah.
Because, you know, gang justice.
Well, yeah, I feel like in the first movie
Right.
and in this one, Leatherface is a sympathetic villain. Whereas the rest of them, he's just kind of almost enjoying what he's doing.
Yeah. I mean, we could take it even a little bit further and talk about how much he really enjoyed what he was doing in like part 3.
Oh, geez. That was, yeah, no thanks.
But I definitely agree with you, Ron, with, you know, this right here being like the only, you know, Dan being basically, other than Gunnar, the only real people to handle Leatherface properly.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, crazy. Not to mention, you know, another thing that, you know, I personally haven't seen tackled too much, but like this is basically the start of the, you know, 30, 40 years later, oh, let's put out a part 2 era. You know, like what they did with, you know, Halloween, what they did with Leprechaun. So that, but, you know, in my opinion, this right here might also be one of the only ones that was done correctly too.
Yeah. And I mean, it had to have been cool to have Gunnar and John Dugan played Grandpa in the opening sequence. It had to have been kind of cool to have both of them on set.
Oh yeah. They're you know,
a younger Grandpa than he was the first.
Yeah,
time.
he did look way younger in this one than he did in the original.
Yeah.
The one thing I wanted to ask is, when I know some actors will talk about this, but when you put on the pretty lady costume that he had on at the end of the first film, did you have, I know it probably wasn't the exact same thing, but because his probably smelled to high heaven, but when you had that similar costume on, was there any kind of vibe you were getting from it? Or
that wasn't me?
That wasn't you?
No, that was a guy named Sam McKenzie. By the time they were shooting that sequence of the movie, they started getting behind the very first week, and we had 32 days to shoot that movie. 32 shooting days.
Wow.
And they started falling behind, and it was getting critical. And so anyway, they said, you know, I don't know how in the hell we're going to get this done. And you know, a big expense is you know, the equipment rentals and the hotels for people, and you know, all that. And so they cut 4 days out of the schedule, and the last 2 or 3 weeks we shot, I think 3 weeks, we shot 2 units 24 hours a day. And so you couldn't always be on both units, you know. So I was off shooting another another scene during that, and we finished, at just in time for me to go over there and watch them burn the house down. That was
I'm sure the insurance on that had to have been ridiculous.
no, they
No.
shot that on a defunct munitions base. It was a military base, and they built that house, to replicate the original, down to the moldings and stuff. And that was a real house they burnt down. It was totally framed. It was drywalled on the ground floor. The upstairs wasn't. But everywhere they were going to shoot inside was finished, and they matched the wallpaper and every little detail they could. And I think they did a pretty good job.
Yeah, I like how they had the door was cut up and the front windows broken out and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that wasn't the real Black Maria, but it was the correct make and model and year.
I always wonder what happened to that semi driver.
Somebody has it now.
I wonder what happened to the driver. He hits Leatherface with the wrench and he takes off.
Yeah, well, you see him hanging in the kitchen.
Oh,
in 3D.
Well, I gotta go back and rewatch it now.
Yeah.
Oh, I missed that.
They caught him. God.
Huh.
Now I gotta go back and rewatch it.
Yeah.
Sorry, Denzel. I'll have to wait to get back to Equalizer 2. It's just when he's going to kill Pedro Pascal. But yeah, it's see, everybody in the chat now is saying, now I got to go back and watch it and see that they found the truck driver. That's wild.
Unless I dreamt that. Maybe I dreamt it. I don't know if everybody missed it. Jesus.
You know what? I think there's so much going on in that opening with everything at the house that it's easy to miss because it gets so chaotic so fast.
And Bill Moseley does such an amazing Jim Cedo.
And that's a credit. I think that chaos lends to just knowing why Leatherface is the way he is when we fast forward in time later. It really works to the benefit of the movie, seeing that happen the way it does. It gives you what the family's going through and then what this, bunch of rednecks are doing. Because they just want that vigilante gang style justice.
Can't get around the good book. Now, I do have a question, and I'll be the asshole in the room to ask it. When you're reading the script and you come across a couple certain lines in the movie, what was your initial reaction to them? I.e., do your thing, cuz. And what was the other one that I thought was
Welcome to Texas?
Yes, we know where we are. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think those were in the script when I read it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, you weren't really it didn't impact your character in any way. And, I mean, she's talking to you, but someone's talking to you in both of them. But the one of them, you're not even on the screen.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I forget if she said anything in the original take and in the slaughterhouse. I can't recall if she actually. Anyway.
The more you know.
I think they workshopped those lines, and those were both. I think John Lessenhop. Those, he was of a mind that, if you can't laugh in a Texas Chainsaw movie, there's something wrong. It's got to be funny. Right. Otherwise, it's just
at
least a hint of that subtle dark humor.
Yeah. And then that was Tobe Hooper's reaction when he made number 2. I think he said he was just so disappointed that nobody got the jokes in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that he wanted to make a comedy, and so he did.
When we
Yeah.
reviewed that one, I believe that was one of the big things that we pointed out were the jokes in it.
Yeah, like one of my favorite scenes in cinema, period. And I'm a big fan of like Chaplin and Keaton and all these guys. But one of my favorite scenes is when Jim Seedhouse looks at the front door and he looks back. He's like, "Look what your brother did to the door." He's more concerned about the door than the fact that they have a woman in a burlap sack and they're dragging into the house.
And when he runs back and turns the lights
Yes, he's
off.
worried about the electricity.
Yeah.
Reminds me of my dad.
Yeah, mine too. It's like the minute you touch the thermostat, he's like, "Who touched that?" Oh man, that was. I mean, what was it like on set for something like this? I mean, I'm assuming that you guys tried to keep it light because it's like the tone of it is kind of dark and such. But was it a light set or?
Yeah, everybody was. There was great camaraderie. I lived in a house with the producer and the craft service guy, and we lived in a house that was out on the edge of town, and everybody else stayed in a hotel in downtown Shreveport. So I didn't have much to do with anybody, except on set. And I think that was intentional.
Oh, that makes that makes sense. You hear that a lot.
And they were all a bunch of kids, except for like Paul Ray and a few others.
I mean, Marilyn was only on set for what, probably a day, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I figured. Yeah, what was she like? I hear she was like super sweet.
Oh yeah, she was. She it was weird. I mean, I had never seen a picture of Marilyn except, from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And she was always that, blonde in the tight white pants. And anyway, they brought me to her and introduced me when we were on set. And I was already in wardrobe and everything. And she takes my hand and she pats it and says, "Oh, it's so nice to meet you."
Wow.
And, this frail old lady, and it was just so weird. And anyway, we talked and a bit, not a lot. We didn't have a lot of time. But the very first thing I shot on the movie is that you see it in stills. I know, I forget how much of it ended up in the movie, where I'm carrying her back to her coffin in the ground.
Oh yeah.
That was the very first thing we shot. And then that night we shot the scene of actually, putting her down in the grave. And
I don't think that part was in the movie. I think it's like they show you carrying her and then
setting her down.
Yeah, there's like one shot of a boot kicking the dirt in,
yeah,
stuff like that. Yeah. They had to cut that because I had I came up with my own kind of business to do in the whole thing and how we were going to block it all out and everything. And they were John was happy not to have to deal with it, I think. But I came up with this whole thing. One of the things that always struck me in the original movie is when Leatherface and the hitchhiker go upstairs to bring Grandpa down to dinner. They carry him down in his chair and they set him up at the table, and then Leatherface pats his head and kisses him.
They adapted that for the video game.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
It's just this brief little thing, but and you get the impression that Leatherface is just a sweet boy, And so I tried to come up with, how would he how would he lay grandma to rest again, and I had a friend of mine there, and I made her get into the coffin, and we did the whole thing, and I closed the lid on
And then,
her,
oops, forgot
and
to
she
open it.
screamed. Oh, when that lid went down, it scared the hell out of her, and she screamed. And they were shooting inside the mansion at the time. So anyway,
Well, we like to take questions from our audience, and Sarah 513 wants to know, what was a nuance that you made sure had to be taken from Gunner, and what was something you did to make Leatherface your own?
Well, the last thing we see happen to Leatherface in the original movie is he gores his leg with that chainsaw so horribly.
Mhm.
And he didn't get proper medical attention after that injury. So he had he always had that limp after that. And that's in the movie, people often remark about that. Hey, he's limping because we cut his leg. Yeah, pretty simple. And then there's it really, the scene where you really get to see who Leatherface is as his version of a human being is in the kitchen, toward the end when they're walking back from the slaughterhouse.
Oh, when she goes to touch his face and he grabs her arm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I mean, you can see him, and it was funny when we were shooting that scene. That was a fairly early scene in the schedule, and that was shot on a soundstage in Shreveport. And the makeup guy, he had a tradition of saying, "Go get that bitch Leatherface," before every shot, just to give me the adrenaline.
Mhm.
And he says that, and I go up and I do this scene, and I knew what I wanted to do, and I told John about it, and he blocked it out so that the camera was there and everything. And they wanted the shot of Leatherface's eyes. They wanted to see, the emotion, and it's genuinely there. I'm happy to say. But when we shot it, it's on this soundstage, and when it was over, they just left the cameras running, and Alexandra was there in the kitchen alone, and finally I hear John say, "Cut." And then I hear my buddy Carl in the back, because it was dead silent. There wasn't a sound. Nobody said anything. And then I heard my buddy Carl say, "I think our boy did it." Well, that was nice.
Yeah, it's your portrayal of Leatherface is just so good, and and this is the only one I'm very particular about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies, because you watch the first one, there's no blood in that one, and then all the other ones tend to try to ramp up the gore, and this is the only one that I look at and don't think, oh, they're just ramping up the gore, because the performances and the story and everything are so engrossing that you just kind of forget that the cuckold chef guy, who's basically just there for her to get in with Alexandra's boyfriend,
Mhm.
is cut in half. You know,
Mhm.
it does. You almost forget about it. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? It's and that's I
Yeah,
think this kind of
we pretty much use more blood in every shot than they used in that entire movie. But still, yeah, it's not the main point. And you know, I did have to push back. I kept getting, you know, opinions. You know, Leatherface needs to be this, you know, this monster, and he needs to be, you know, this, and that. Okay, yeah, right. No, that's not what Leatherface is. He is a freight train when he comes after
Mhm.
Kenny at the, you know, at the beginning, chasing him up the stairs. That was a fun shot. I rehearsed that for days, because that's a real 3 foot long pointed meat hook made out of steel that I sink into his back.
Mm.
And so I got a piece of styrofoam about the size of the receiver on his back that I had to hook into to drag him back down the stairs. And so I set that target, you know, on the stairs at the back stairwell of Millennium Studios, and ran up those stairs at full speed. You'll notice that Leatherface is right-handed, and I'm naturally left-handed. And so it was, and that kind of worked because it gave a certain awkwardness to everything he did. You know, he wasn't, you know, it you know, it was a left-handed person doing something with his right hand. But anyway, I practiced hitting that target, and when the day came, man, I said, you know, we blocked it out carefully, did it, you know, at step by step, then walking, then half speed, and then, all right, you're ready to try one at full speed. I said, all right. And I said to Kiram, I said, man, you know, when you go down, don't move. You can't move. I can't hit a moving target. I'll hit the target. I can't hit a moving target. And I said, you know, any delay, they'll cut. Don't worry. You know, don't, you know. And so anyway, I guess the adrenaline of having Leatherface chase you with a 3 foot steel meat hook was pretty extraordinary. And so, having gotten caught up in the magic of the moment, Karen forgot what I said, and he goes down right on his mark, and he immediately gets back up. And I'm already in mid swing with a 3 foot long steel meat hook. All I could do was turn it sideways so I didn't gore him in the back of the head. And I hit him in the back of the head with it. And I tried to pull it, you know, as much as I could.
Mhm.
You know, but I did, you know, just smack him right on the back of the head, and it hurt. And it's funny. I said, "Oh my God, I think, you know, I think I killed him," you know, because he howled.
It
And
explains his career choice. His last
yeah.
credit was a voice acting role on Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood. So he's like, he stepped away from horror after that. Like,
you mentioned a lot of blocking in that scene, and I know you come from theater where
Mhm.
there's a ton of blocking. How much blocking was done for a lot of your sequences in the film?
Oh well, you know, I mean, when you're dealing with a live chainsaw with a real chain on it, you got to be careful. You know, everything was meticulously planned. if the chainsaw was going to come within a foot of another actor in the blocking, we put the toothless chain on, which is this one. So it's a real chain. I don't know, where are we? But it doesn't have any teeth on it. They ground all the teeth off. So the prop guy found this in his toolbox just a few years ago. He was cleaning out his toolbox and he found that, and so he sent it to me.
Oh, that's awesome.
Nice.
Yeah,
Really cool.
He's a nice guy.
Now, did you have
Yeah.
any conversations with the writers at all? Because for my money, and this is just my opinion, this is the only good thing Adam Marcus ever put his hands on. Because I'm a big Friday the 13th fan, and what he did to Jason Goes to Hell bothers me to this day. But that's besides the point.
I don't mind Jason Goes to Hell.
That's because you're a millennial.
No, I didn't have any. Well, Lessenhop really put his mark on that script. He went through that, like I say, he had plenty of input, and all those changes. If you talk to Adam Marcus about it, he'll tell you, that wasn't the movie I wrote. They did make a lot of changes. I think the only writer I had met was Kirsten Elms, and she just did one pass on it, I believe. I can't remember where she was in the sequence. I don't recall.
Okay. Well, we're at that point in the show where we're going to talk about what we thought of the movie, and if you're so inclined, we'd love to know what your thoughts, like what you would rate the movie.
Yeah, we usually go on a scale like IMDb of 0
1 to 10. Yeah.
I enjoyed it as a movie. But it's impossible for me to be objective. Every time I watch it, I see everything I did wrong. And that's just, this was the closest to I think a good performance that I've ever achieved on film. And so of the, I haven't done that many movies, but of the,
I still enjoyed you at Sharknado 4. I don't care what anybody else says.
hell yeah.
So I love cheesy horror movies. So.
Yeah.
I never made it past 2.
Oh, well.
Now I have to.
Yeah.
And before we get going, there's one more question here. He would like to know, are there any other Easter eggs other than the driver in the kitchen that were missed by everyone?
Well, there probably are. Let me think. There were a few things put in to tease the movie that was supposed to come next, because they had the rights to make 6 of these.
Good God.
And there was such a battle between Millennium and Lionsgate and everybody about what to do. Millennium dug their heels in about making that prequel, and
The one that nobody asked
they had the script ready to shoot. For it basically picks up the very next day, tells you what happens to Heather and the cop, and what happens to Leatherface next, and how the town reacts to all of this. And it delves a bit into why Grandma was so damn rich.
I think didn't she marry? She's a Sawyer. She married into the Carson, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you see a little little Easter egg when they go and they look at the radar map that shows where the cop cars are, and the sheriff says, "Oh, I know where they're going." If you look at that map, you'll see why Grandma had so much money.
Well, all right. We do have another question here. How physically demanding is playing Leatherface? Watching these movies, I'm always thinking he's always doing a lot of heavy lifting and dragging people.
Yeah, it was the hardest I'd worked in my life, and I have had plenty of physical jobs. It was brutal. The scene where I pick up the semi-conscious Kenny off of the table and hang him on the rack, that was a callback to, Pam getting hung up. And I got some flack from my buddy Carl. He says, "Man, when Gunnar did that, he didn't struggle nearly as much as you did." And so I went and asked Kieran. I said, "How much you weigh?" He says, 165. How much you think, Terry McMinn weighed in 1973? 100 tops if she was soaking wet.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of a difference.
And my guy was unconscious.
Yeah.
He was
dead weight.
Dead weight.
He was able to actually give a little jump to help. And so anyway, I went back and told that to Carl. I said, "Carl, there was no comparison between the two." I said, "I can hang Terry McMinn on the meat hook all day long."
I think all of us can put Terry McMinn on the meat hook all day long.
Yeah,
I think there needs to be a contest of how many times you guys can do it.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it anymore. I ruined my back doing stuff like that.
It's like that's the Scottish games when you throw the giant tree.
Right.
Yeah.
So
one of my favorite projects I ever did was a music video for Lord Huron. I don't know if you're familiar with that group.
Mm-hmm.
They talented bunch of guys. But anyway, it's called Fool for Love. If you ever see it, you'll see. I'm credited in it. And there's a scene where we get in, it's in a bar, and of course there's a fight. And I pick this guy up and throw him across a pool table. And that was the moment my back was done. That was it, man. From then on, no more stunts, no more of that shit.
It's all voiceover work from now on.
Yeah.
So now, what would you give the film? Biased, unbiased, whatever you feel, on a scale of 0
I love
to 10.
it. So I'm, ranking it just among Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies, I would say it's tied with number 2. I love number 2. Of course, nobody's ever going to top the original. That's not even debatable. But it's that level, I think. But a completely different type of movie. I mean, if you can compare the two. So yeah, I don't know. It might be a 7.
Okay.
7 maybe.
What about you, Hunky J?
Well, before we continue, I posted a link for everybody if you wanted to check out that Lord Huron video and check out what Dan did on that.
And why don't you pause it as you're watching it to see the exact point where his back says nope?
Yep.
Well, as everybody knows my opinion on these ones, we went through them all. The original being the second movie I ever gave a perfect rating to over the last 5 years of doing this.
It is a perfect movie. But
I agree. The only other movie I gave it as high of a rating to was Evil Dead 2, which I still think is one of the greatest movies of all time. But I would personally, because I gave number 2 like a 6, and I've kind of went down from there.
Well,
I gotta say this is probably closer to a 7.5 for me. 7.5. I don't think this is as good as the original. There's something about the original that I don't think can ever be recreated and done in such a magnificent way as the way it was then.
It spawned a genre of cinema.
Oh, I completely agree.
Definitely did.
It was the very first, when VCRs came out, back in the late 70s. We finally got one in the early 80s. And I bought 2 VHS tapes to have and to hold. One was Eraserhead.
Oh, nice.
Was Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And I wore that out. I mean, I watched it so many times. I had an old Philco Predicta TV in my room when I was a kid, the kind that swivels. I watched it on that thing on black and white. It's great in black and white.
Well, now I gotta, yeah. I'm gonna have to take I have a digital copy of it. Now I'm gonna have to put it in my Final Cut and make it black and white, so I can watch it in black and white.
Desaturated,
bump
up the contrast a little bit.
Yeah. And what about
some of the noise lines in it and everything?
Exactly, like the film, like from an old TV or something.
Add the film grade and all that.
So what about you, Jeff? What are you giving this?
I gotta say, first off, I went and saw this in the theater not long after it came out.
Me too.
And I loved the movie. I enjoyed the 3D aspect because it wasn't just pandering to the audience like, oh, it's in 3D.
Like Friday the 13th Part 3?
Yeah, it reminded me like
3D.
I don't think Friday was Friday the 13th actually shot in 3D or was it converted?
Yeah. Part 3 was.
Part 3 was, in that old school way. But this reminded me kind of like My Bloody Valentine, where there were gags for the camera, but the scope of everything, there was depth to the scene. So when you're seeing somebody walk and you're seeing them go to the house, there was that depth. Felt like you were within the scene with them. So that 3D was done really well.
I will say the guys who were in charge of 3D, there were like 3 of them. It takes a village to run those cameras. And there's one guy with this, like remote control thing, and he's controlling the settings as the camera's panning, and those guys, they were Austrian or German or something. Cool guys, and they loved 3D. They did some concert movie for some big group, one of the big ones. And then they got into the producers of that movie got into a beef with Disney. And so nobody's ever seen that movie. I mean, Disney buried them.
Oh, wow.
And it's one of the greatest 3D, examples of 3D cinematography that you'll ever see.
Yeah, those guys went on to actually do the 2021 Cowboy Bebop as well. It was the people who did the 3D work for that was Dwight Carter, Ryan Markley, and I'm not going to say that name.
Is that the
K?
The Swiss guy or the German?
K.
What is it? Try it.
K. Kyung Parkim.
No, that ain't the
Bless you.
Yeah, those were the 3D artists for it. It was him. The lead artist was Ryan Markley.
No.
This is what's credited as the 3D artist for the
for what?
For Texas Chainsaw.
No.
Well, this is according to IMDb at least.
Well, that's
The rigging technician was Patrick Sicilian.
That doesn't sound Swedish.
The 3D engineer was Alicia Robbins. Nathan Trucks did the video assets for the second unit of the 3D. The 3D engineer and stereographer second unit was Marcus Lanksinger. If any of those names ring a bell. I'm not seeing anybody credited for any other 3D work.
Well, I'll find him here. I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah.
And while you guys were doing that, that's why I guess that's why they call it Video Village. Yeah. I, as somebody who's made films, Video Village is ridiculous. It is nuts, and it is, yeah, it is. Oh my god! I remember when we were shooting Becoming Undead 3. I was sitting down and I had a monitor, and the DP was like, "I've never worked with a director who was sitting down." It's like, have you ever heard of Hitchcock or Fincher or basically 90% of all directors sitting down while they're looking at a monitor?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not Michael Mann.
Yeah,
Well,
I never watched any playback of any of the stuff we were doing, and they kept saying, "Oh, do you want to see it? You want us to play it back for you?" So I said, "No, I don't. That ain't my job. You let me know if I'm not doing my job right. I trust your judgment.
So
I don't want to, sit there and think about Marcus Lanzinger. Who's the other guy? There was a couple of them.
Yeah.
Marcus Lanzinger. He was the lead guy on the 3D engineer stereographer. He was the guy with the thing. And there was another guy with him, but I can't find it. Anyway, yeah.
Which I do love his. I know he did the work with the Planet of the Apes movies.
The newest ones?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, those were really good.
What was I saying? I was actually saying something.
Oh, you were just looking up the names of the 3D people.
Yeah, let's talk about how much I enjoy the 3D aspect of the film.
Yeah.
You said there was another guy with Marcus as well.
Yeah.
He couldn't find him though.
Oh, I thought I said something. No.
So what do you give the movie, Jeff?
I'm going to be a little bit higher on this one. I give it an 8, mainly because anytime I've watched it after seeing it in the theater, I always have fun.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the line "do your thing," cuz it doesn't really bother me, because I feel it's kind of something along the lines of Franklin. Franklin in the original movie annoys the hell out of me. So I'm just like, you know what? It's like that. It's just something that's there.
Yeah,
the whole of the film doesn't take away that one little thing being there.
It annoyed people a lot more than we thought it would. We thought it was funny. I remember doing it and thinking, "Oh yeah, that's funny."
So yeah, I give this an 8. It's a lot of fun. And I like the aspect of the family isn't seen really as villains in this. They're seen as more misunderstood, and the town and everyone that was part of that vigilante mob is more the villain.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
So I like how things kind of shift. Whereas we're always led to believe, oh, they're a family of cannibals, they're the bad guys, and this was like, well, Leatherface's entire family were murdered. Instead of being brought to justice by the book, they just burned everybody down. They just burned the house down, killed everyone except Leatherface. So he's like, okay, you've taken my entire family from me.
Well, he
I
also
buried
thinks
the last member of my family that I know exists until Heather shows up.
He also,
you don't really blame him.
But not only that, but he also probably feels immense guilt by the fact that he is the reason they're all gone. You know what I mean?
Survivor guilt is a real.
Yeah, and he's one of those. It's for me, it's like, he. I can't think now. I just totally lost my train of thought. It just went off it went off the rails like Thomas the Tank Engine.
Let me get real quick. There's two things I want to touch on that I really, really liked that we were talking about. And it's one thing you brought was the way you slammed the door was exactly like Gunner, the two hands bringing it over as hard as you could.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, that is exactly like in the first film when he slams that door. too, the scene you were talking about in the kitchen, you can see the weight of everything when Leatherface sits in the chair. Just everything that had happened in the moment when he's, at the carnival throwing the chainsaw at Scott Eastwood's character and everything going on. He's in one mindset. You can see when he sits down, it's just the weight of everything that has happened. It's just kind of weighing on him, like, oh.
Were
The
you scared
reality
that
kinda hits him
Scott's
then.
dad would have been mad at you if you would have got him with it?
Yeah, people, I don't know if people really appreciate how difficult it is to perform a character in a mask. You really, your face is a great, means to express, feelings. And when you don't have that, it's challenging. And you don't have, he can't even raise an eyebrow to something, you just can't do that. So you have to find other ways. Everything that Leatherface thinks manifests in some physical action.
There's a physical conveyance of what he's feeling in that moment.
he-
That's
he-
why
he-
that scene in the kitchen every time when he just
And
kind of slumps in it.
Yeah, and it's
really good.
It's when it's good, it's subtle. And I tell people, people have come up to me and confessed that they were actually brought to tears by that moment where, Heather is trying to, clean his mask off. And, he's not at all comfortable with that. And the entire emotional weight of the thing happens in about a half an inch of distance. He's there looking at her, and you can see his eyes through the mask. That was one of the things they did in designing the mask, was to make sure that, in certain shots you can see his eyes. And basically he goes from, here to here, and he's scared.
Well, plus he probably doesn't. He's not used to having somebody take care of him that way. You know what I mean? Like before. Well, Grandma did, but like she's gone. You know what I mean? But before that, the cook, Drayton wouldn't go and clean his face up for him.
No,
you know what I mean?
No, nobody but Grandma ever treated him right. And here's this new person, and he just wasn't, finally, at the end of that scene, he wasn't ready, and he couldn't say fuck it, so we had to, we shot about 5 different ways of doing that scene, whether he was just going to push her hand away, or whether he was, just going to take her arm and, move it away. And, they tried every different one. And, the editor chose that one.
Do you think they would have he would have allowed her to take the mask off if he previously didn't sew it to his own face?
Yeah, no, nobody's ever going to take the mask off.
I'm glad you said that, and I hope Marcus Nispel and Andrew Borniarski are listening right now.
Why is that, Ron?
Well, don't get me started on what I think about Andrew Borniarski and his hatred of Gunner. Good God. But
it was mutual.
Well, yeah. I do love in the behind the scenes on the Blu-ray, Gunner making a joke about how he shuts the door.
Yeah.
And I remember when I met Gunner at Days of the Dead in Chicago, we were just sitting there talking after he signed his book. And he showed me an image that Andrew had been sending around of Gunner's head on one of the victims from the remake. I was like, wow, you're a child. You are Leatherface. You're an 8-year-old. Good God. But I do find it, as I knock glasses off my face, I'm so excited. I do find it hilarious that the two people to play Leatherface the best are well-spoken intellectuals, and like Gunnar was a writer, and you're a rather intellectual theater actor, and I think you managed a cabinet store in North Hollywood for a while, if my research was correct.
For
and he also wrote
yeah,
a
good
short last
15
year,
years.
2 years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah, see, so it's like, but you don't hear anything about anybody else who played Leatherface.
Well, Bill Johnson is I don't know if you've ever talked to Bill Johnson.
Mm-mm.
He's a brilliant man. I mean, and articulate as hell. I mean, he makes me feel like a fool, And he's so he's one of the most well-read people I know. Yeah, he definitely. And whenever we did a show, he, Gunnar, and I always showed up with a pocket full of Hoya de Nicaraguas because I knew there was going to be an opportunity, to get those two guys to, hang out and just listen to them talk. That was the best.
That's amazing.
Oh, you mentioned sewing the mask on. Then when we did reshoots in a soundstage in Culver City, and they rebuilt that wine cellar with the sliding door because they realized after they had wrapped that they never got that shot.
Oh wow!
So they rebuilt that entire set.
That's it. The continuity person's fired. Script supervisor's gone.
It was a pretty impactful scene, so I'm happy they were still
and it was. I don't think it was in the script actually. I think that was something that they just realized. Oh, holy shit, we didn't put that in. We like there's a callback to the original when at the end of the original movie, the last thing you see is Leatherface doing his rage dance. He swings that chainsaw high and he twirls around, and it's just this exaggerated thing. And that was one thing. If you watch our movie, when Bert is hanging there by his fingernails, about to go in the meat grinder,
I know
Leatherface, he takes the chainsaw above his head and makes this kind of exaggerated arc, and just relishes cutting his hands off and watching him, and then he ends with the chainsaw above his head again in triumph. And it was kind of, I wanted it to be kind of a bookend for the in at the end of the original, it was an expression of his failure, and I wanted it to be the expression of his triumph.
I think it worked.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go.
I was going to say sewing on the mask. We shot that scene in Shreveport, but what we did was I just basically mimed completely sewing with a needle and thread through the mask and taking the needle and carefully, jamming it and, and just mimed the entire thing. And they were going to put the needle and thread in digitally. And so anyway, they screened the movie for some executives, a rough cut for some executives at Lionsgate, because they were curious what we were doing. And at the end, one of the producers takes Carl to one side. She says, "Oh, that scene where he sews the mask on his face, I could feel that. Oh, that's going to be great." And he says, "Yeah, once we get the needle and thread in, it's going to be awesome. We'll have a little blood dripping." And she said, what do you mean? She saw a needle and thread, or she thinks she did. So anyway, cut to about 2 months later. We hadn't done reshoots yet. Carl gets the estimate for how much it's going to cost to put that needle and thread in.
Uh-oh.
And he didn't have the money. He calls me up. And this was like the day before we were going to do reshoots. He said, would you object to actually, placing a blunted needle in your mouth with some thread on it and doing some stuff? I said, yeah. I said, I'll sew the fucking thing on to get the movie done at this point, because I thought we had a 2012 release date, which we lost. Anyway, he came up with this whole gimmick of how to rig that needle and thread, rigging a bloody needle and thread inside the mask and taking a clean one, and then with sleight of hand, you don't see it. I put the needle with the clean thread into my mouth and you don't see me take it out. And then I'm pulling, there was just the tip of a needle sticking out of the mask that you couldn't see. And I pulled that one out, and that one had a bloody string on it. And then there was another, I forget, I think I had the string in my hand and I had to let it go because there was somebody behind me who was going to pull that string. As I'm pulling the bloody one out of the mask, they're pulling the clean one up so that they match. And if you look at it closely, you can see they don't match. I mean, we were close. But anyway, we saved $80,000 doing that.
Wow.
Yeah.
I always wondered how it was done because I couldn't see the seams, and I'm somebody that's always appreciated practical effects. So whenever I see them, I'm always trying to see if I can figure out how they're done. And that one I had no idea. I'm wondering because you see where it looks like the force of it coming through, and it's like I don't know how.
And then going back in, and it's all just the twitch of the lip that gives you the impression that he actually sticks himself with it, Yeah. But
I think for me, I'm going to give this one an 8.5 because it's the closest to the original as you're going to get, the closest sequel you're going to get to kind of continue the story. It's I saw it in theaters and I loved it, and I wish I could see it in theaters again. And now I got to go back and look for the man boobs on the truck driver hanging from in the kitchen of the Sawyer house. And this has been a fantastic chat with you, Dan. We really appreciate you being on.
Well, thanks for having me.
Of course.
I've enjoyed talking to you guys.
And so you can find everything at talesfromthepodcast.com. All of our contact information at the bottom. What do you got coming up in the Skewered Universe on Jeff?
Well, we just released an audio commentary track for Demon Knight. So you guys can go check that out. It's available for everybody, kind of a new year, end of the year thing. We wanted everybody to have access to it. So it's in your feed now. And it's January. So we're going back to January's for Giallo. We're going to be covering some Italian Giallo films. It's going to be a lot of fun. And we're going to have Chuck Nasty on for one of those episodes.
Oh, boy.
Hey, the guy brought a lot to the table last year for Giallo. So I'm happy to have him back on.
And the Ron Perti show this week is, we don't know what we're doing yet. We're going to fly by the seat of our pants for the first episode of, actually it's the second episode of 2024 because we were on there the day after. So, and don't forget to buy Tales from the Podcast, Tales from the Podcast. Hi, how you doing, microphone? Tales Shock and Terror at talesfromthepodcast.com. I think we're running low on issues at this point. Yes.
I mean, I think we're down to under our last 30 copies. I mean,
okay.
Go ahead, get one, or go fuck yourself.
Yeah, whatever. And we're diligently working on issue 2. And Dan, do you have anything coming up?
I've been, working on. We're gonna do season 7 of this Unsolved Worcester. It's unsolved murders and missing persons cases from Worcester, Massachusetts, and environs, where my friend works. It's unsolvedworcester.com. It's also on YouTube and all the podcast streaming platforms. If you haven't gotten enough of my voice.
It's funny. One of my good friends, he one of the co-hosts of Trick or Treat Radio, and they're out of that area as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've went ahead and I've shared that link for everybody as well.
Awesome. Fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
I do want to say you have the perfect storytelling voice, so I would definitely listen.
All right. Well, you let me know.
And I'm a huge podcast fan, not just being a host of a podcast. So I'll have to check it
he's
out.
very excited right now. His nipples could cut diamonds.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So, but I want to thank everybody for being here. Next week, we're going to be talking about the 2022 Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Oh my God, heaven help us.
Yes, and we're going to be ending out the Texas Chainsaw series with that because we kept with one timeline. We didn't want to go into some of
because we don't know where 2022 comes from. It's just, but we had to do it because we can't just go out on something amazing. We have to torture ourselves.
Right. And then after that, Ron, we get to torture you with 100 first watches of the entire Leprechaun film series. So
I blame the audience because you could have voted for the Romero Dead saga and you didn't. And
they also could have voted for Final Destination and they didn't.
Instead, they followed
wanted
me
to see
and they
you watch
wanted to see
Leprechaun.
more Warwick Davis, who may I add is one of the most incredible actors under 4 feet. And he is just great, and I love that. I can't wait for those.
There's a lot of fun to be had in the Leprechaun series.
Of course you did, Sally. Of course you did. Of course you did. But yeah. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you all for tuning in. I'll hit the button, JB. Don't worry. With that, everyone, the crypt is closed.
Thanks for listening, kiddies. You're all a scream.